Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio and welcome to week 24 of the Stash Buster block series. And the block today is called 4-Patch Fox and Goose. This one looks a little more complicated than what we've been doing lately, but we're going to break it down into units and it'll make it a lot easier. So I hope you'll stay tuned and learn how to sew this block. For this block, which is called the 4-Patch Fox and Goose, it's made of 3 different units. We have a half square triangle, have a flying geese unit, and we have 4 flying geese units, and then we have 1 square and a square unit. So if we break it down into units like this, it makes it easier to sew and to put together. So for the fabrics, you're going to need a background fabric, and you're going to need 2 contrasting colors. Now, I did a blue and a yellow, but you could use, whatever colors you like. So for the background, we're going to need 4 pieces that are 4.5 by 2.5. We need 2 pieces that are 2 7/8 inch square, and then we need 1 piece that is 3 3/8 of an inch square. For the corners or the triangles in the flying geese, the yellow here, you're going to need 8 pieces that are 2.5 inches square. And for the half square triangles, you're going to need 2 pieces that are 2 7/8 inch squares. Those are going to match up with these. Then you're going to need 1 piece that is 4.25 inches square, and what you're going to do is you're going to cut that in half diagonally both directions so that you're going to wind up with 4 triangles. So those are the pieces you need to make this. So the first thing we're going to do is draw the diagonal line on the white squares, your background squares. These are the 2 7/8 inch ones. Draw the line from one corner to the next. That's going to be a sewing line, and you're going to pair those up with your blue 2 7/8 inch squares. And I've got a batik here that has no right or wrong side. So we're going to put right sides together, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch away from this drawn line on both sides. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Okay, I'm going to follow this line 1/4 inch away from it, and I'm just going to stitch down both sides. And I'm going to swing it around and do the same to this side. And I'm going to repeat for the other piece. Okay, then we're going to cut those in half along that drawn line. And then we have 2 half square triangles from each piece. Just like that. And then we're going to press these open. Okay, normally when you're pressing seams in patchwork, you press towards the dark. So you would lay your dark side up and you would press it open like that. But on this one, what we're going to do is we're going to press towards the light side right here. And what that does is when we put these 2 units together, they're going to go together easier. So we're going to press these towards the light fabric. So it seems wrong, but it really will make things easier for you in the long run. And there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm just going to set these aside for right now. As I get that pressed open. And this one does not want to go. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to let these go for right now, and then let's work on the square in a square unit. So we're going to need the 3 3/8 inch square, and then we're going to need these triangles here that we cut from the 4 1/4 inch square of the blue fabric. So let's go sew these together. Okay, for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to sew the base of the triangle, which will be the long edge. We're going to sew that onto the side of the square. And to get this even, you can just eyeball this with from the back side, and you want the same amount of space on each side of the square here and here and here. Or you can fold all of these, fold them in half, make a little crease just on that edge, and fold the triangle in half and make another crease. Just be careful because you've got a lot of bias edges in these pieces now, in your triangles. And then match those up and just hold them in place with your finger, and then stitch. And use your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. I'm going to take this out, and then I'm going to flip it around to the opposite side and do the same thing. So I'm going to fold it in half, do a little finger press, fold my next triangle in half and do the same thing, and then match up those 2 creases and the raw edge, and then sew that. Okay, so here's what we have so far. Now I want to go to my pressing surface, and I want to press these open. So I am going to press these towards the dark fabric. So let's go do that. Okay, so I pressed those pieces open, and this is what we have right now. And I'm going to go ahead and trim off these tags that are sticking out, because they are only going to add bulk and not serve any purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and trim them off. Okay, now I want to sew the triangles onto the other side. So I'm going to do the same thing. I fold this in half, find my center, get my triangle, and do the same with that. And then you can match those creases up and sew this in place. Okay, now I'm going to do the opposite side, do the same thing. Find my center for both pieces. sew it in place. Okay, that's what that looks like, and then I'm going to trim off those little pieces here, those little triangles. And get them out of my way. And now I'm going to go to the iron and press this open, and we'll have the square and a square unit. Okay, so here is the square and a square unit. I had those two sides already pressed before I sewed these two triangles on. So let's go ahead and press these open. And there's the square and a square unit. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to go ahead and trim the little dog ears off of the half square triangles too, so we won't have those to mess with after a while. And then I'm going to start working on the flying geese units. And with the last several blocks we've made a lot of flying geese units, so if you've been following along, you probably are very familiar with making flying geese units by now. I've got set all those pieces aside, and for the flying geese units you need your 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles and your 2.5 inch squares. I've already gone and I have drawn a diagonal line from one quarter to the next on the back of each one of these yellow squares. So let's go make some flying geese units. Okay, we're going to start with a rectangle and a square, and then we're going to position the square so that the diagonal line is running from the center to the opposite lower corner, and we're going to match up all those raw edges, and we're going to stitch from one end to the other right down that line. And then grab another rectangle and square and do the same thing. And then just keep going until you have all 4 rectangles with one square on them. Okay, so I have all of those sewn on, and I'm going to cut them apart and trim off the starting threads. And the next thing I need to do is to trim them, and I'm going to trim this corner off, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance next to that seam line. So I'm going to get my regular scissors and just trim that off, just like that. And you can save those triangles to make half square triangle units, or use them in applique or confetti quilting. There's lots of uses for those, so you can save those and use them for something later. And now we need to press these open, and we'll have half of the flying geese unit. So let's go press these open. Okay, we're just going to lay those down, give them a quick press, flip it open, and there we go. That's all that needs. Now there are other ways to make flying geese units, so if you have a different method you prefer, that's great. You should use that method. Use what works for you. Okay, now we need to put on the last triangle for each one, or the last square for each one to make the triangle. So those are going to be positioned the same way, just on the opposite side, with the drawn line going from the center to the opposite corner. So from here down to there. So we're going to go and sew the rest of these on. Okay, I'm just going to sew right along the drawn line. Okay, now we're just going to repeat what we did last time. I'm going to cut them apart, and then I'm going to trim off this side of the triangle, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There's one. Okay, now we need to press these open, and then we can lay out the block and start sewing the units together in rows. So we're going to go ahead and press these last triangles open. There we go. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is to square up this square and a square unit. These usually will have a little extra space around them, a little extra fabric, so you want to trim that down so that you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm trying to get this all squared and just trim that down. And sometimes it's just a little sliver that you'll have that's extra. And just go all the way around and trim that down. And watch over here, you should wind up with 4.5 inches square when you're done with this. And one last side. Now if you don't do this, your block may not come together the way you want it to. Okay, so that is just minuscule amounts, but that will make a difference. So I'm going to get those little scraps out of the way, and then I'm going to move my cutting board and bring back my little pressing mat. Okay, so we're going to lay this block out, and we're going to start with a square and a square unit, and then put the flying geese around. And so you're going to have your colors facing each other. So you can see that makes the typical 8-pointed star. And then your corners of your half square triangles, the blue is going to go towards the center. So the white background is out. So there you go. There's your 4-patch fox and goose block. So now we're going to sew all of these together in rows, and then sew all the rows together. Okay, I'm going to sew the first 2 pieces of the first row together, and remember when I said to press your background towards the dark on this half square triangle? This is the reason why. You've got a flying geese unit that is pressed towards the yellow, and you've got this half square triangle, you now have this pressed towards the white. And when you put these together, now those two seams are going to nest together, and it's just going to make your sewing go together a lot easier. So I've got this seam here matched up with this seam. They are butted together, and that will make your points look better when you get this all together. So I'm now going to take this to the sewing machine and sew this. So just got to remember which side you need to sew on. There we go. And let me take that out and show you what that's going to look like. Okay, now we have a nice point down here where those seams all line up. So that's what you want. So that is why we flipped the pressing. Instead of pressing towards the dark on our half square triangle unit, we pressed towards the light. So there are exceptions to all the rules when you're quilting. So I've got the same thing here. These two are going to nest together and should make a nice point for me. And here you go. So they all come together. We don't have one shifted up and the other shifted down, and that can happen when you've got your seams pressed all going to the same direction and they're laying on top of each other, so you wind up with like 6 layers of fabric on one side and 2 on the other. Things are going to shift on you. So that's one of those exceptions to pressing towards the dark that will help you out. But if you are really concerned about your fabric shadowing through, and that's going to bother you more than messing with getting these to line up when you sew them together, you know, then press towards the dark. So, you know, do what works for you. For me, I hate messing with seams like that. They never turn out right. So I make the exception and press towards the light fabric in cases like this. Because the next row is the flying geese unit with the half square triangle. And on this one we have to match points. So what I'm going to do is place a needle through the flying geese in the back, and I've got it so that it's right at the tip of the point there. And then I'm going to put the needle through the tip of the triangle there. I hope you can see that. And then I'm going to just slide those two together, and I'm trying to keep that needle perpendicular. I don't want it to go down, I don't want it to go up, I don't want it to go left or right. I want it to stay perpendicular as I line up my raw edges. And then I'm going to pin them together right there by that point, and hopefully that will work for me, and we'll see. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm watching for where the where the stitching lines cross. I want to go right to the outside of that, just like a thread away. And we'll see what that looks like. Okay, that looks pretty good. I haven't cut off any of the points. There, you can see the tip of both of those points. Okay, I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to go through the back right at the point of the flying geese unit, And then I need to make sure I am going on the opposite side of the half square triangle, doing the same thing with that point there, putting the needle through and lining it up and pin it in place, and then going to sew these all together. And then when I get to the point, I'm going to watch where those stitching lines cross and try and go right above them. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to sew the third row, and then we can press the rows open, and then we can sew them all together. Okay, here are our rows, and I'm going to press this row with the seams out and just go from there. So let's just press these out, and then this row I'm going to press the seams towards the center. And this is the one that's going to resist no matter which way you decide you want to press these. It's going to resist because you've got a lot of seams coming together right there. So if you need to turn it to the back to press it, you're going to do that. Oh, here we go. And then I'm going to press these seams out just like the first row. Okay. Now I can sew all three rows together, and then we'll have a finished block. Okay, first two rows I need to match the points. We've got the flying geese unit that is matching up with the square and a square unit. So I'm going to go put the pin through the tip of the flying geese and then through the tip of the center of that square and square unit and line them up and pin them. Now I also have to match seams, so I need to keep an eye on that. And I'm coming up to the point here and see if I can get right across the top of that. And then I'm going to make sure these two seams are nesting together, and they seem to be doing good. Oh, so straight across. Okay, now I can add the third row and we'll be done. Okay, those points look good, and let's do the same for the last row. Put the needle through the tip of the flying geese unit and then through the square and a square unit and line them up, pin it in place, and then check my seams, make sure they're nesting together. There we go. Okay, let's press this open and see what we have. Okay, I'm going to press the seams as they were stitched. And now to press this, you can either press them open or up to one side, or you can press them open in the back, whichever you like to do. So there we go. Here is our 4-patch fox and goose block. Hey, I wanted to show you what 4 of these blocks put together side by side would look like. And this is what we have. It looks like you can see the star points with the yellow, but it's a very jewel looking, kind of faceted looking pattern, I think. And it's symmetrical, so it doesn't matter which way you turn the blocks, you're going to get the same look. And we're having a thunderstorm right now, so I hope it's not too loud. But there we go. This is the 4-patch fox and goose block. So I hope you enjoyed this video on the 4-patch fox and goose block. This is one that looks really complicated, but once you break it down, you can see the 3 units that it's comprised of. Take them one at a time, and it's not quite as difficult. So if you like this video, I hope you will click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And don't forget to click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.